Hey guys, welcome to the Extended Cut podcast. This is the very first one, so the pressure's on to make sure that we get this right, and maybe it will make appearance again in another series. But yeah, we're gonna chat a little bit about the Lost Arts series today. So we're smack bang in the middle. So we've just finished Laura's talk.
Yes.
Did it go well?
I mean, I'm probably not the person to ask, but yeah, I mean, I had a lovely time.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
It went
was
really
great.
well.
Thank
It's
you.
great job.
Good. And so, yeah, we're going to kind of touch on some of the things that we're not going to get the chance to kind of look at on Sundays, some of the things that we would have liked to have put into the series but haven't. So just to open up the conversation, Leon, this is a Leon Evans original, written by yourself. And so just kind of share with us the heart behind it, the thinking, what inspired you with it.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I think we actually talked about it, didn't we?
I think we did.
A couple of months ago, really. I think maybe stimulated by the fact that during COVID, the whole question around the arts themselves, and I think like being a musician, having a lot of, arty friends as well, thinking, actually, and I think there was that statement of, is this a viable industry or a viable job? And I think it made me think actually we could lose the arts. And then I think we then had a conversation about what as a society we're also losing the art of, and I know this series could appear a little bit like, oh, this is an old person series, that when you start talking about with technology is causing us to lose the art of conversation, which is what I'm going to look at in this series as well. But actually, I think it's bigger than that. I think actually we've gained a lot as a society, and I think even during COVID, we've rediscovered some things that we'd lost. But I also think we need to push a little bit deeper into some of those things that I still think we need to get a hold of. Yeah. Maybe things from the past, that actually need to live with us going forward, really. So that was kind of my heart behind it, really. And again, I didn't write it. I gave it to Laura to say, what do you want to say? And so Laura worked with me on it as well, came up with some ideas together. And then Stuart's going to be talking about the lost art of humility. And actually, when we started writing ideas down, before we knew where we were, the series could have been...
Yeah, there was a string of them,
there was a whole string.
We had a year's worth of material.
Absolutely, there could have been a 52-week series here, so there isn't, so don't worry about that. But I think it was just something about, in all of the technology and in all of the new and all of the innovation, have we lost some things as well that maybe we need to rediscover and reintegrate into our lives?
I think it's really interesting that, I think this is a conversation that was needed regardless of whether we were in a COVID world or not, but I think COVID has highlighted these sort of things. I think we're starting to have a bit more of emphasis on what we need to kind of rediscover. So it doesn't kind of just, if you're not arty or creative, this is not just a series on that sort of stuff. It's much more than that as well.
Absolutely.
This is a question open to all of you. And so what do you think we as a society have lost touch with? And what do we kind of need to kind of rediscover? So just a broad kind of opening question. What do you think we've lost touch with? And, what's the sort of thing that we need to rediscover?
Yeah, I mean, you said, Leon, when we originally wrote the list for the series, there was a very long list in there, I think. And I think there were a couple for me, and I don't know whether you're touching on in the conversation piece, but I think confrontation is one of them, one of the things that we batted around.
Sure,
as someone who's I don't love confrontation, it's not my thing, but God has taught me a lot about it, and actually the positive use of it and it making relationships stronger. Talked about intimacy. There's, I don't know whether you guys have got, I could write our list, I could say our list off, but I figure that I would cover tons of things. Alison, what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, there were loads of things on that list, weren't there? And quite a lot of them for me kind of line themselves up in this concept of emotional intelligence.
Yeah, it's really good.
Which is something I've been studying for a while anyway, so I'm probably a bit obsessed by it. But actually I think that it does connect to some of the challenges that we've really got in terms of the way in which we relate, particularly at an emotional level. So, for example, one of the things I've noticed recently is that whole piece about the ability to perceive other people's emotions. And then to respond appropriately. I mean, it's doubly difficult at the moment because, of course, we're all on Zoom and screens and stuff, and we're all behind masks. So a lot of our natural triggers are missing. But I think that capacity just to sense how other people are feeling is something that is becoming a bit of a lost art because we're so pushing forward to try and speak about what we think and what we know and what we imagine. We're not really taking the time to think about what does that mean for other people? How might they feel
Really good.
as we're talking about this? That's one of the major things I've been thinking about quite a lot recently, really.
Yeah. And that's really good because like a lot of the conflict, the intimacy, the listening, all of that is wrapped up really in the emotional intelligence piece.
And I think that comes out more and more as well as we use text and as we put statuses up and things like that. Like the amount of times as a teenager I got into arguments and like falling out with people because I text something, and now any conversation that I have that's challenging or a bit confrontational, like I'm not writing an email about it, I'm calling somebody. And I think like I know so many conversations I've had with young people and young adults has been around, why on earth did you try and have that conversation over Facebook Messenger? Like have it face to face. And I think that's really important, because I can write a text message and be smiling and laughing as I write it, and someone receives it and it's a massive insult to them, or do you know what I mean? And I think we just lose that sense of reading each other's emotions.
I think that's so true, and I'm going to look at this in this series when we look at the lost art of conversation. I think the thing with technology and text is, and that I only discovered by studying for this as well, and I didn't realise I was doing this, is that you can like airbrush it all, you know, so you can you craft the perfect text and then you send the perfect text, you know, but actually what you miss by that is the relationship and the working out the mess and working out, you know, what you meant to say and all of that. So I think we've lost the art there. We think that we're connecting, and we are connecting, but I wonder whether we've lost the art of relating because it's all through technology. You know?
I think this opens a bit of a discussion, just moving off on a slight tangent with the whole kind of digital world and digital space. I had a conversation with someone on social media like just this last week, because it seems as though that the stance, at least from what I can read on social media, is that it is completely negative, like, and it's detrimental to our health and all of that. And there are downfalls to social media, and there are places that we struggle with. But if I use this analogy in that cake's bad for us, but we don't stop liking cake. And we just learn to have it. We just learn to not eat it all the time. And, you know, it's the same with social media. It's that you don't have to stop using it and delete everything off your phone. But if it's becoming unhealthy, do things that help you withdraw from it. If that makes sense.
There was a I wish I could remember who it was by. There was a podcast that I heard, and they were talking about social. It's just a tool. And so just like any tool, it magnifies what's already inside of you. So money, you could say the same thing. And I think if someone is prone to angry outbursts, and the tool that you use for that will be social media, it makes social media look bad, but it's not social media's fault that you kind of did this thing. And so I think it's how we use our tools well, and how we make sure that we're magnifying the right things through the use of it as well.
I think as well, it comes down to self-awareness and emotional intelligence again, because it's about how you know yourself and how you're going to respond to things. And so if you know that a particular social media app is not good for you because, I don't know, it draws comparison in on you and all of that sort of stuff, then you know that that's probably a place where you should kind of step back on. But it doesn't mean from everything. But let's kind of stick with the emotional intelligence conversation, Alison. How do you think that has kind of a more direct impact on our faith, and how it affects us spiritually as well? Because we've kind of spoken about how it affects us on an internal level, but then going a little bit deeper on the spiritual side, how does it play on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we're made in the image of God, and all of the things that we would ascribe to emotional intelligence, I think are godly capacities. You know, I'm just thinking about things like emotion regulation. That's another part of emotional intelligence, the capacity to actually manage your emotional expression. And I think that lines up completely and utterly with so many texts in the Bible where it talks about being self-controlled. And I think that's one of the things that particularly at the moment we're struggling with. No matter which medium we use, we're struggling to maintain that level of control that enables us to express how we feel, but takes into account how it might make others feel and the implications of our words. And I think these things are so closely aligned to what's on God's heart for us at the moment, that actually he wants to teach us some things about how we manage this stuff, you know, how to act assertively without being angry. How not to be passive, but to actually find a way of clearly saying what we need to say in the words we need to say it, so that we're representing God's plan and purpose for his world and his people. We need to learn how to do that, but without shouting and without giving in to this kind of polarization of, no, we shouldn't use social media, or the online stuff's bad, or, oh, it's the only way to do it. Actually, it's about using it with wisdom. And I think that can really help us with our faith. I think if we took those things in mind and recognize God made us to be emotional beings. He made us to have emotion. He loves us to have empathy towards others. There's so many different characteristics, but we do need to think about them carefully.
Yeah, for sure.
It's really good.
It's that whole thing of the emotions not being the boss. Yeah. And, we've spoken about that in a couple of talks. And, that has definitely been something that I've tried to hone in on over the past kind of 12 months, but particularly over the lockdown period, because it's just so much more prevalent. It's just so much more at the surface. I'm noticing that my emotions are very turbulent, and I've got to have a greater self-awareness of them because they're so volatile at the moment, and so keeping track of them and managing them is a bit difficult.
I think on that, I think we've lost a bit of the art of empathy. In terms of being for people.
That's so good.
And so often, and I'm guilty of this, I'll pick up my phone and look at something that somebody's posted and I'll think, what an idiot. Or
me? You're talking about me? That's one of my posts.
Not looking at anyone. But also politicians come up on the TV and you're what a moron. So some Laura's like that. I'm not. I'm more prayerful. But
I'd like to apologise for that right now.
Going through the empathy with it and thinking of them as a human being rather than just a politician or a person giving an opinion. And I think we lose that sense of empathy. And I think I was listening to a talk from Andy Stanley and he was talking about parenting and how we don't he was talking about getting kids to say sorry, not just using full sentences, I'm sorry for, and helping them to understand why they needed to apologize rather than just that they did apologize. And I think it's increasing that art of empathy and understanding. I'm sorry that I made you feel like that, and it almost puts some ownership on it.
I feel like within that wrapped in is the hot topic of polarization as well. And so again, this is something I lost the art of, the tension piece, and I know we talk about that quite a lot, but the idea that someone can say that and that doesn't write off everything that's even that may be an out of context thing, or that might be this benefit of the doubt piece that someone is bad and they have said that and it's wrong, and rather than going, okay, well, there's a whole person here and there's a whole truth, and I see one perspective of this and there may be more going on, and even just trusting. And I think even in terms of how we view governmental decisions and how we view different world sort of affairs, just maybe I don't know everything, and maybe there's more going on here than I could possibly say.
I think for me that's one of the questions I'm going to look at in this series is the very first question God ever asks.
Yeah, great.
Which is, where are you? And even though he knows the answer, and he came into the garden, to look for Adam and Eve, and his first thing could have been, I'm God, I'm here, I've come to do it. But actually his very first question was, where are you?
Yeah.
And I think we've lost the art of that because we want to go into a room or we want to go on social media and we want to say, this is me.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? A bit like that song from a show, this is me or whatever. And I think that's our society, this is me. And I understand that, but actually God's first question was, where are you?
Yeah.
And he had every reason to say, this is me, he's God. And I think we've lost the art of that. And I think that goes back to the empathy, to the emotional intelligence, to the awareness of other people, really.
And it also links in with the things that Laura was talking about in her message today about waiting. Is that sometimes somebody can say something initially that feels really off-putting and you can argue with, but actually if you wait and you listen to what else they have to say, generally you get a much better idea of where they are. Because sometimes the very first statement can be really off-putting.
I'm just laughing because we do this a little. I do this, don't I?
We talk about this quite a lot in our house.
I haven't finished. You haven't let me finish, and I am bad at that.
Well, it's not just the interruption thing. That is a thing, but it's not just the interruption thing. It's about realizing that there might be more that's going on inside somebody than they are communicating. So somebody might be shouting at you. So, somebody was shouting at me the other week in a job-related context. And I thought for a moment, and I thought, well, I can either shout back.
Yeah, that's good.
Or I can think, what's actually going on here? And once I figured out what was going on, I said to them, look, I can understand you're upset. I think this is what's really going on for you. Is that right? And that just took the aggression straight out of it. And then they ended up crying. Because actually, if we take a moment to wait and to figure out what's beneath that thing which is superficially being expressed, actually that gives us a much better way of finding a connection with people.
I think going back to more of the digital side of thing, I think the digital space tends to allow you to kind of dehumanize people. And so you can't see that, you can't empathize, and it's really hard to, because you can't see their emotion, their reaction, and so that waiting piece comes really hard, because when they're just behind a screen, you can't see how they've said it, or the emotion and the expression on their face. That then you can't read it. And
we fill in the blanks there as well. Do you know what I mean? And we fill in our own reasons. And I think we did that anyway as humans. Like, how many of us have arguments with people in the shower in our head? Like, all the time. Do you know what I mean? When they say this, then I'll say that. And then it goes on and on and on. And I think like social media allows you to fill in the blanks more. And I think we lost that art of assuming the best in people and assuming, hey, there's something different going on than what's presenting. And I think social media lets us fill in the blanks. I mean, they're only posting that picture because they want to show off, or they're always angry. What's going on? Like, we need to learn to assume the best in each other.
I think the other thing that this connects into, and I know this is something I experience a lot at work. You know, I'm a university lecturer. I'm doing all of my teaching online at the moment. And a lot of students won't turn their camera on. And they won't turn their camera on, not because they're not listening. They are engaged. Well, I hope they are engaged. Some of them are engaged.
Assume the best.
But quite a lot of them will say something like, I look a mess today. And that breaks my heart, really, because I just think, it doesn't matter. I look a mess most days as well. I'm not looking great when I'm teaching. But I just feel really sad about the fact that we're stopping ourselves from connecting with people because we're trying so hard to look right.
That's good.
And actually, looking right isn't the primary aim. It's connecting that's important. And actually, if somebody does come onto a call or something and they're having a difficult time and they look a mess, then they're communicating something in that, aren't they? And I just think even if we're using digital means, it's great to get some kind of visual image to go with it, so that we can really see what's going on with somebody.
I think for me, through this season as well, I think with the dehumanizing of people, I think also there's the generalizing. And I think for me, you know, I'm a little bit passionate about this as a Jesus follower, looking at other Jesus followers on social media. And again, trying not to be judgmental. Maybe I do this as well, I don't know. But there seems to be a growing thing of generalising. So every Tory is this, every Labour person is this, every Democrat is this, every Republican. That stuff, I mean, we've just lost the art of seeing people as human beings. That actually they could have a different view to me, and not all of them are this. So not all of them are heartless, or not all of them are communist, or not all of them are. And it's this generalisation, and I see it on social media of people who are friends. You know, who are the Jesus followers, and I think this is a season for us. I think to stop almost and to look at our own responses.
And
you know?
I think I am a big fan of digital media, social media. I know we're saying a lot that's negative about it, but I think the only way to combat that really, and the difficulty with social media is that it's designed that you hear more of your own voice. And actually the only way to combat that sort of generalization is to have a one-on-one relationship with someone who's very different to you and to listen to them. And so our feeds, we just have to be so aware that your feed will feed your perspective. And so yes, all of these people seem to be like that because that's what you're receiving. This is not an accurate window to the world. And so the only way of combating that is put that down and go and have a relationship with somebody who is different and listen. And I just don't think and it's especially difficult now because it's hard to have a relationship with anybody from in your house. But but even the effort or the confidence or the opportunity to do that and spend time with someone outside of your comfort zone, it's not again, I think it is a lost art.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think with the whole social media conversation, again, I think we need to be able to use social media for its intended purpose and not what it's formed into. You know, the word social's in there. It's meant for community.
It's good.
You know, so like the Life Central online community that we have, that's the whole point of it, because you know, most of our lives are lived online at the moment, just because of the situation. And so the way that we have to do community is online. And so we've got this tension at the moment with social media becoming, you know, doing what it normally does, because you know there's the US election that's just happened, and you know everyone's got an opinion about how the government are dealing with lockdown, and then you've got little pockets where it can be really good, and it can be really healthy, and so I think more focus on the places where it's healthy and it's being used for its intended purpose, less on the kind of debates and opinions and divisive conversations.
I think that's the thing when it comes to social media. It's all about intention, and like not just like the intention of what was meant to be posted, but like when you go on it intentionally. And I think like it's about you managing your social media rather than your social media managing you.
100%.
And like, you know, so many times I find myself with the telly on and I'm watching something and then I'm scrolling. And I don't know why I'm scrolling, but I'm scrolling, and I'm going through Twitter, and I'm going through, do you know what I mean, Instagram and all that stuff. And it's like, it's just, you suddenly find yourself on it. And actually, that's what we're trying to say with the message around social media, is not come off everything and delete it all, it's all bad. It's actually have intention around it, choose your moments and go, right, I am going to spend the next 5 minutes on social media because I'm choosing to, rather than an addictive reaction that you don't know what to do, pull your phone out and go on Facebook. And I think that's where the balance is.
I think that's really important, and I think we're all we've been saying, you know, we've been sucked into that as well. So this is not, you know, looking down on anybody else. But I think I read something this week about this, and they said she studied a lot of this as well, and she said we don't know how to be alone anymore. And when you don't know how to be alone, you'll end up lonely. And we think we're not lonely because we're connected to this, but we've never been as lonely as we are now. So we're never more connected, but we're never more lonely as well. And I think there's something about, and she was talking in this book I was reading about the fact that, you know, when we're in a line waiting in a supermarket, we're on our phone. Whereas, of course, what we would have been doing before potentially is talking to someone. Do you know what I mean? Or engaging and relating to a real human being, you know, but because we're so, you know, joined to that, we've lost the art of relating. We're connecting, but we're not maybe relating. And so this is where the tension, I think, really comes in.
I think it is, and I think that was a really important point Andy made there about doing things intentionally, because that makes it a conscious decision. What we're describing is our unconscious actions. Where we don't think, oh, I'm lonely, let's go on my phone. It just happens. You suddenly find you've got your phone in your hand again and you're scrolling. You're thinking, why am I doing this? I'm actually watching the telly.
Aren't you?
And it's almost as though it's become an unconscious action. And what we need to do is absolutely use it, because it's a massive gift. It's been such a gift to us. I mean, we wouldn't be doing anything in church if it weren't for
I wouldn't have
technology. That's very true. You wouldn't. But it's about making sure that we use it consciously. I am choosing to do this now. It's a thoughtful action rather than an unconscious behaviour. It's such a massive difference between the two.
And I think just to throw in a positive thing into it, because, you know, right at the start of this, you and I and many of us read a book from Nona Jones. It says From Social Media to Social Ministry. And she says in that online church is real church, because it's filled with real people who need a real saviour. So I think just to balance it out the other way, this is such a great gift, you know, and like you say, a tool to be used, but we've just got to be cautious on the other side of it, haven't we?
You know, like you said, like I know we're all fatigued with Zoom, and we kind of have this dread feeling when we hear that we need to be on another Zoom call and all of that. But like you said, it has been a gift. I think one thing that you touched on, Leon, is the whole thing about being alone, and I think that in itself is a lost art. The art of like solitude, quietness, and it's every time I go on a walk, I feel so much better because I've been out and I've spent time just not on my phone or anything like that. And I think that in itself is a lost art. And
That's
I think if I just sit in quietness for 10 minutes, I get fidgety because I'm so used to just being on the go all the time. And so I think that in itself is a lost art as well.
Tom, I'm so glad that you talked about going for a walk, because if I'd have said that, it would just be an old lady thing. But it's absolutely true, and there's so much evidence that supports that going for a walk, turning off your stuff just for a short period of time is really good for your mental health. A green space, go look at a tree, a field, just switch off from something is really restorative.
I mean, I don't even walk around any scenic areas. It's just hell's own. It's not. it's just the concrete jungle that is. But it still helps. It just makes me feel so much better internally.
Your wife Hannah said something in a staff meeting this week which really resonated with me. She said there's a difference between relief and restoration. And a lot of what we do to bring relief, watching a movie, watching Netflix, going on, nothing wrong with any of that. It's not restoration. There's a big difference. And I think, again, rediscovering the lost arts is about rediscovering those things that are restorative to you as a whole human being and restorative to your soul. Psalm 23, he restores my soul. Doesn't say he relieves my soul. It says he restores my soul. And that's so important.
And for her it was coffee, going for coffee all the time at Costa. And I think it's about spotting the things that you're doing that unintentionally you're trying to get relief out of. And it'll be different for every single one, every single person. So for you it might be different. No, you go.
So it's almost like maxing out on junk food. I think what we do is we fill ourselves with junk food in terms of the relief part and wonder why we're still hungry. And for some people I think it's alcohol. I think for some people it is social media. For some people it's something else. And as you say, I think it comes back to the emotional awareness and intelligence piece of going, okay, what do I actually do that fills me, and what do I do that is just a thing to switch off to but there's no real like nutrition in it for you, and it's becoming aware of those things.
I think the more and more that you do something that is restorative, the greater your self-awareness becomes.
Yeah, that's really true.
Because for me, most of my kind of reflective and kind of powerful thoughts come on a walk. Like I used to walk when I lived back with my parents. I used to walk the dogs and be out for half an hour, 40 minutes or whatever, and that would be the time where I had my most powerful moments with God. Because that's just the space. I haven't got anything else in my mind, and it just somehow connects me into a deeper sense of meaning and all of that. We are quickly running out of time, so I want to move on to another question. I want to kind of just talk about we've just kind of touched on it with the whole kind of solitude piece, but what are some things that we can do to kind of fix this and get back on track? So we've spoken a lot about digital media, emotional intelligence, and all of that. So what are some practical things that we can do to help manage this tension?
I think just to jump in on where we were just before that and to link it to that question, I was just thinking about Friday, just a couple of days before we filmed this. I went on a walk. I was off and I went on a walk with a friend. And we ended up walking for like 2 hours. Which is a long walk for me, out in the countryside, and we were in mud and all kinds of stuff. And it was quite, we felt like little boys, to be honest, because we were walking through, we didn't know where we were, we got lost and all that stuff. But what was restorative about it was being outside and going for a walk, but it was conversation. And so I think for me, one of the things, is because we weren't on our phones for 2 hours. Well, until we got lost and we needed to look at the GPS. But it was restorative, and it's about conversation. And to me, conversation is about listening and speaking. And it's like, I'll use this illustration. You can't play table tennis if you've always got the ball in your hand. You've got to let it go. And that's conversation. Right now it's your turn. Now it's my turn. Now it's your turn. So I think to me, and hey, we're in lockdown, but we're allowed to go out for a walk with one other person. That's a great gift. Imagine if all of us as Jesus followers were walking with people during this season, the next couple of weeks. Imagine the discipleship that could go on. Imagine the evangelism that could go on. Imagine the restoration that could go on. Put your phone away, go for a walk, maybe an hour, 2 hours with another person, and listen and talk and listen and interact. I think that could be amazing.
There's something just really beautiful about getting lost in conversation. And it's something that's spiritual about it as well.
Absolutely.
And healthy. It's really
absolutely
good.
I think one thing for me practically is just going back to the previous analogy of identifying in your life what is junk food and what has nutritional value, and making sure that you take down the junk food and you up the nutritional value. So if your junk food is, oh my gosh, I've had a really, really long day at work, I'm just going to make my way through a bottle of wine. That's probably not the best idea. And so how do you bring nutrition? Well, actually, I've had a really long day at work. Reading really fills me, so I'm going to make sure that I get half an hour to just go and read and get some space. And it's almost just intentionally messing with those levels. And as you said, it's different things for different people. But going into lockdown 1, there was such intentionality about how we spent our time because we were scared, I think, of what could happen. And I think I was aware that in lockdown 2, I was much less intentional. You will Zoom all day and you would Netflix all night, and I used to be worried about screen time. And so I think it is some of that identifying this stuff and just meddling with the levels a little.
I think it's about putting those rhythms and disciplines in place, and like it's things like knowing what stresses you out and what will disturb your peace. And guarding that, and so we've had some good discussions in the last few weeks around Sabbath for the staff team, and like how do we have process of me making sure that I don't contact Leon on a day off unless it's urgent, and like having those processes in place is really helpful. And I think like things like charging your devices outside of the bedroom, so it's not the last thing that you look at and the first thing that you look at either side of sleep. It's about like we say, like having a dog is one of the best things we've ever done for our mental health, because it gets us out, because he has to have a walk every day. And like so often on a Saturday I can't be bothered going out and going up Clent or going to Kimber for a walk, but always halfway through the walk I'm like, I'm really pleased we did this. But most of the time I don't want to do it. And I think it's knowing, hey, this is what's good for me.
Self-discipline, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's good.
I think for me, I'm going to say something a bit different to everybody else. I think we need to reclaim the ability to be silent sometimes, to be alone and to be silent. Because we talk about conversation such a lot, and we've been talking about this quite a lot, about the way in which we differ in the way in which we relate to our friends. So I don't do chatty very easily. I'm an introvert. If I'm going to talk, usually it's a bit deep and ponderous. Leon's much more fun than I am. Okay. But one of the things that I've been noticing is that the way I relate to friends is a little bit similar to the way I relate with God. Yeah. And if I don't allow myself enough time where I am silent in God's presence, filling the space with noise all the time is very easy. But in silence, actually, then I get a better opportunity to have a conversation with God. Because I'm quite good at talking to God about stuff that I want that's all deep and meaningful and ponderous, but what God wants to do is to connect with me relationally and to be in my space. And sometimes things just pop up in moments of silence that, again, aren't intentional. They're like things that would come out of a conversation when you walk with a friend. But it's only when you're on your own and when you're in silence and you give God chance to speak that actually there's the chance. And that sounds like a really old-fashioned thing, like monks used to do a million years ago. But actually I do think it's a lost art. I think God would speak a lot more to us and a lot more clearly if we sat still long enough and quietly enough to be able to listen to what he wanted to say.
And I think in all of this, and especially that actually, I think what you can do is sit down and try to do it not work and you give up. But actually all of this is it's an art, because you practice it and you get better at it. And I think even in terms of sitting down and spending silence with God, like sometimes it's terrifying because you know what's going to come up, or your brain goes in a million directions. It's an art. You persevere. It's a discipline. You get better at it. And so I think in any of this, it's something that you try and try again and try again.
Yeah,
that's good.
It's about not feeling guilty if you mess it up.
That's right.
You know, if you mess it up, just pick it up again and start again.
But it's like any artist, any composer, any painter, any sculptor. They didn't get where they are now. Exactly. You know, or the work that we look at, and we look at a Michelangelo, or we look at great songwriter or a Shakespeare. They didn't start like that.
No.
You know, and I think that's really important. And I think for any of us that have tried any spiritual disciplines and we've messed up, or it was boring, or we didn't like it, don't give up. You know, keep trying. I think that's really important.
I think one thing that I'd like to add into the conversation is just an awareness of how you talk to yourself. Like I've noticed that like when I've got pretty good now at when toxic thoughts come into my head of capturing them.
Yeah.
The verse that take every thought captive.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it goes back to the emotions thing where it makes you feel a certain way about yourself. But knowing when you're talking to yourself in a negative way is really important, because that then determines how you feel about yourself and then how you go about your day. And it has this kind of domino effect in how you experience life in that given day, you know. And I think all of this kind of comes under the emotional intelligence kind of umbrella that we've spoken about, and a heightened self-awareness.
It's good.
I think that's the root of it all, really, and that's where it all comes from. So we are out of time. It's been a good conversation. There's probably a lot more that we could have gone into and a lot more different things that we could have touched on, but that's all the time that we have. So thank you guys for being here and Thanks, your wisdom and your input, and maybe we'll do this again at some point.
Let's do it.
Who knows?